Hello, everyone. I'm Justin Silverman of the New England First Amendment Coalition. Thank you for joining us for another 30-Minute Skills. For those joining us for the first time, welcome. These monthly lessons are a quick and efficient way to hone your reporting skills and build on your First Amendment knowledge. But they're also more than that. They're a way for you to reconnect with the community of journalists, researchers, attorneys, and academics who regularly attend these lessons. To everyone, please use the chat to introduce yourself, showcase your own work, and connect with others. And make sure that you register for our upcoming lessons. Registration links can be found at nefac.org. As a reminder, previous 30-minute skills are available at nefac.org and on our YouTube channel, 5 Freedoms. Lessons include data cleaning, privacy law, Microsoft Excel basics, and how to diversify sources, among many other topics. Today's presentation is focused on how to protect yourself online, and it's supported in part by the estate of Gloria Negri. Gloria was a trailblazing journalist at the Boston Globe for more than 50 years. This program is part of her legacy of newsroom education and her lifelong commitment to local journalism. You can learn more about Gloria and other NEFAC supporters at nefac.org/supporters. We have a lot to cover and not a lot of time, so let's get started. Stephanie, all yours.
As mentioned, this is going to be a lesson, really an introduction on how to protect yourself online, securing your devices, your accounts, and keeping your privacy. So I am Stephanie Sugars. I'm the senior reporter at the U.S. Press Freedom Tracker, which documents press freedom aggressions across the country. And so as part of my work, I do regularly speak with journalists who are experiencing online harassment, stalking, doxxing, or targeted violence. And so we're all dealing with this sort of fundamental question in the modern age of how do I keep my information, my reporting, my address, your phone number, the names of your family members out of the hands of bad actors when we really have to be online in order to do our jobs and connect to the communities that we serve. So we've sort of broken it into 3 sections. And then I will take lots of questions and provide extra resources for a deeper dive for anyone more interested in really getting into the nitty-gritty of this. But so we're going to start with protecting your devices and communications, these easy first steps, best practices for social media, and then the all-important question of how do I reduce the risk of being doxxed? So encryption is your friend, and it's easier than you think, and in some cases already enabled, which makes our lives much easier. So the question of securing your communications and encrypting your devices really depends on who you think your quote unquote adversary is likely to be. So the one that we're most likely to run into as journalists and online are trolls. They are often individuals, self-taught with low resources, but that shouldn't make you underestimate them. There is a lot of knowledge available on the internet, and especially with growing skills in open source intelligence and AI, a lot of things are becoming easier. The next sort of group is corporate or non-government organizations who are going to be a dedicated group of individuals with higher levels of resources, both in terms of time and money, who can engage in tactics like phishing or spear phishing, which are targeted attacks to try and get into your accounts. And then we have government bodies. I'm referring specifically to US government agencies just for simplicity's sake for this presentation, but they have the authority to demand access either via subpoena to you or to whomever is holding that data. That can be your cell phone provider. It can be Apple to get into your iCloud, things along those lines. So this is sort of broken down by each of those adversaries, some first steps for you to secure your data and your devices. So with the first, BitLocker and FileVault for Windows and Mac respectively are simply programs that encrypt your hard drive, either the hard drive within your computer or can be used for an external hard drive. And for those who are terrified about the vulnerabilities that exist online, of which there are many, and want to move that information off of a cloud or off of sort of these web platforms into a physical device that you can have more control over, you have to be sure that you are encrypting that so that if you have someone who may be coming into your physical home or your office space, that it is still protected. There are mechanisms to check whether your data was involved in a breach. Basically, if you have ever signed up with your email address for an account with Target or HBO, with your bank, with a social media app, that may have been compromised when they were hacked, meaning that your private information beyond just your email address may have been compromised. So looking to a website like Have I Been Pwned, which I'll have a link to later, can be a great way to know whether you have accounts that are vulnerable, where you should change passwords, and what information may have been released and existing now on the internet. Next, we have end-to-end encrypted communications. Your text messages are wildly insecure, and I would strongly discourage you from using text messages to communicate with sources or with your reporting team when you're out in the field, especially when covering protests. A lot of law enforcement agencies have technology that is called Stingray, which can be used to sort of scoop up the metadata and account information of all devices within about a mile radius, maybe more. Don't quote me on that specific aspect, but the general concern should be there that your messages, the photos you take, et cetera, may be compromised in the field if you're not careful. So using alternatives like Signal, especially, or for interpersonal communications, email, like Proton Mail that does have better encryption and less access for the company itself, means that those weaknesses of being vulnerable to a subpoena are reduced. Another great option is Apple's new advanced data protection program, which works really well for anyone who's using iCloud as a storage. And so if you go to your account, hit iCloud and scroll to the bottom, you'll be able to enable this functionality, and it will give you an idea of what all will be included in that encryption. But it's things like your notes, your voice notes, your memos, your photos, a lot of these things that are just put on iCloud so you can look at them between your devices, but then without extra protection may be subpoenaable. These last three are ones that if I could have you walk away with anything that you can do today to improve your security online, it would be these. So first, using long and unique passcodes or passphrases. My preference is passphrases, which is a string of 5 or 6 or more words, like hippopotamus, theft, barricade, and then you can add a series of numbers or capital letters or use spaces, whatever the needs of that particular website are. But one, it's incredibly difficult and time consuming for a computer to hack into or to find that password by just trying random combinations. And it's also much easier to move between different devices if it is something a little bit more recognizable than the sort of gobbledygook of just banging on a keyboard with random letters, numbers, and symbols. To keep all of these long and unique passwords to keep them organized, definitely use a password manager like 1Password, which you can set a very complex password for that one. And then now you have all of these passwords organized, and it makes it very easy to also change those passwords if you find out that that account has been compromised. Two-factor authentication, which is becoming more and more common, is something you should enable on every account that allows it. There are a lot of different options for enabling it. You can either receive text messages with that 6-number code. Not ideal. It's okay, but it's not great, especially if you think your phone may have been cloned or that those passwords might be intercepted. Better is a physical token like a YubiKey that gives a one-time verification and is synced to that particular account, so you have that physical thing in your control. Or you can have authenticator apps like Google Authenticator, or as mentioned with 1Password, it can also, in addition to saving your passwords, also serve as your 2FA. And then lastly, having your social media accounts as secure as possible. But so with that last one, it brings us really neatly into this next section of what are the best practices for existing on social media, which is so crucial for many of us, both in our reporting and in sharing that reporting with the public. So ideally, in a perfect world, everyone would have a professional account who needed one and a completely separate personal account. And that professional account, because you're serving the public and connecting with potential sources, you want to be identifiable. You want to have your name clearly there alongside the outlet that you're working for, or if you're working independently, likely with contact information if you are interested in receiving tips from the public. In order for that to be safe, you need to ensure that you're not following any family members who then may be tied to you and used as a means to penetrate your own personal security. And then also avoid posting photos with family or friends or in locations that you frequent, because they can, again, be used to sort of geolocate where in the world you are at a given moment, potentially exposing your home address, where your child goes to school, your favorite neighborhood bar. And so also setting up a data retention policy, which is basically using something to routinely delete old posts, can also be extremely beneficial on a professional account, just to ensure that there are none of these sort of lingering vulnerabilities. On your personal accounts, where you can feel freer to post personal updates about your pet or your engagement or whatever the case may be, in order for that to be safe to do, you want to have a unique username that is not common across all of your personal accounts, that doesn't use any nicknames or your birth year or anything like that that might help connect the accounts to one another or expose other information about you. And you'll have really strict privacy settings. Ensure that the only people who can see your account are friends, and that you know who all of the friends who are following your account are. Again, another sort of caution of consider carefully whether you want to reference your workplace, just because with various search terms being what they are, it may be used to find that account. I said that was the ideal. For a lot of us, including me, that ship has very much already sailed. So things like Tweet Deleter, which you can schedule to automatically remove any old posts of a time frame of your choosing, 6 months, a year, 2 years, to have them just automatically wiped. With Meta, so Facebook and Instagram, their privacy settings and privacy center are actually pretty decent at walking you through your options for bulk editing posts. I know that I had some old posts back on Facebook from when I was 11 years old or something like that, that were set to public or to friends of friends, which even that much can be jeopardizing to your safety, because you never know what the practices on social media are of your friends. And so you can't necessarily control that they're not just letting random strangers follow them. And then lastly, if and when you are posting photos of yourself near your home or on vacation or whatever the case may be, strip all metadata if you can from those photos using a tool like the metadata anonymization toolkit, which remove details about the when, the where, the device, etc., that can be cleverly used to expose you. And all of this is to work towards this, reducing the risk of doxing, which is one of the major threats that we as journalists are facing online and offline now as well, where we are seeing bricks thrown through the home of Lauren Chulijan, or I remember the case of a journalist who had a photo of his father's gravesite emailed to him as part of a threat. And a married couple that ran a newsletter in Massachusetts were stalked and harassed and almost had a tracking device put on their vehicle by a small rogue team from eBay. So you never really know exactly what might happen. And so it's much easier to prepare and reduce your risk than to respond after the fact. And so the best way to approach that is to map your profile and get an idea of what the vulnerabilities you may have are. What is the information that is already available online about you? The same open source investigative tools that we use in our reporting to background politicians or verify the validity of a photo or video or to identify the location where something took place are things that can be used against us as well. My biggest recommendation would be using a red team where it is you and a colleague or a trusted group of colleagues basically attempting to dox each other. And so the general procedure going from easiest to hardest is doing base level name, email, phone queries across all of the different search engines, because you never know whether Bing will have a different data broker than Google will show up with. And just collate all of the information that is available, making a spreadsheet or a Google Doc or something along those lines, wherever you feel is safest. Maybe it's just writing it down on paper, but using each piece of information that you do acquire to see if there's more that you can dig up as well. Next, it's finding the accounts of family and friends who may have lower security. So seeing if you can track through whether you have family members identified on Facebook. Who is that cousin that you see that they may see once a year, but who writes things publicly and every single post is open for anyone to see? And see what additional information you can glean about them, where they live, who their family or close-knit community are, and keep digging from there. Next is whatever images you were able to find, be it just your photo headshot from your bio on your website, for the newsroom you work for, or anything that you do find on social media. Running reverse image searches can show you other places where that image may have been used or altered, but also other images where that individual may appear. So it's good to know if you're using this example again, if your local bar was having an event and you showed up in the back of the photo that they posted on their public profile, and that bar happens to be 4 doors down from your apartment, you want to know if you have been sort of geolocated in that particular zone because of the potential threats that that can pose. And then last, with what those images, see if you can find any details in the images, a particular building, a street sign, a branded vehicle like a bus or a police car that might give hints about where in the world this photo was taken and how close that gets you to where your colleague lives or works. And I recommend using a red team just because it helps with the objectivity and sort of you have to build off the information that you find rather than the information that we already have about ourselves. But you can also dox yourself through this same process as well. So now that you've found all of this information about you that's been exposed online, what do you do with it? What do you do about it? So you can talk to your family and friends about the content that they've posted, about the privacy settings, and generally ask that they not post photos of you in particular contexts or without your permission. That is also something that you can set on Facebook, for example. You can make it so no one can tag you in an image that will actually be connected to your profile without your permission. Your name may still appear, however, and this is why knowing what those connections that exist is so important. Next, opt out of data aggregators. There is a large list, the big ass data broker opt-out list, I believe. I'll have a link later, but that you can go through one by one for things like White Pages, Spokeo, etc. These sort of whack-a-mole different websites that come through the internet or buy your data from your grocery store where you signed up for a rewards card in order to get your information. And so it's it, again, very much a game of whack-a-mole where you have to keep going back to sometimes the same sites over and over and over again. But there is a way to request that the data that they currently have be taken down. If you have the resources, or if your newsroom has the resources, I would strongly recommend using a service like Delete Me that goes and does that process for you independently, and also can pull the information of your close family. Next, have your social pages excluded from the Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine. They have a pretty easy process there for asking that your pages not be archived, and that ensures that when you're using something like Tweet Deleter, that the posts that are deleted are truly gone forever, or as close to forever as is possible on the internet. And then lastly, depending on your threat level and how alarmed you may be about the possible exposure of your address, or the adversaries that might try to come to you and assault you, or harass you, expose you, every state has some variation of an address confidentiality program. They are specifically targeted at individuals experiencing intimate partner violence, but the language is often broadened to include individuals who have experienced stalking and harassment. And so use your best judgment if you think that that program might be a good fit for you. Basically, what it does is removes all of your addresses. So if you own a home, or if you're registered to vote, though your home address is listed on those public documents that anyone can access. So this program replaces those addresses with a PO box. You might be able to get a letter that also makes it possible to make it your banking address, which can relieve that risk. Additionally, it's most effective when you've recently moved or are recently going to move, but that program is something I learned about relatively recently, and is a great option for anyone who does own property. And so if the worst does happen, if you do find yourself doxxed, your information exposed online, document everything that you can, save links, take screenshots, etc., so that you can share that with your newsroom, possibly with the public through advocacy, and also with the police if things continue to escalate. Also, report, block, mute, delete everything that you can. And tag in a trusted colleague to help with both of those things. An onslaught online can be extraordinarily overwhelming. And so having someone who is supporting you by taking over some of that labor, who can let you know when the abuse has slowed or stopped, but also to be there as a social and psychological support because of how trying and traumatic this experience can be, is an excellent choice. So don't go through this alone. There are also other support systems if you don't feel that there's anyone in your life who can act in that role for you, or if more help is always welcome. So these are some good options. IWNF, PEN America, Vita Activa all have great efforts to support anyone who is going through online harassment or doxing. So we've hit the point where I would love to answer some of your questions, and I'm just going to leave this resource page up with some of the things that I've mentioned for additional training or direction in approaching these things.
We have a few minutes, but a couple questions that I want to get to. First, perhaps maybe the easiest question, I don't know, but some confusion over LinkedIn. Is it personal, private? You suggested keeping them separate,
Yes.
but how do you suggest we use LinkedIn when there can be a mix of both?
Yes. So I think that LinkedIn is a really tricky one. There are some decent privacy settings in place where you can make your profile private to anyone who is not a direct connection. It's a little bit of a mixed bag, but I would generally consider LinkedIn to be a professional sort of social media platform. One, because it is mirroring your resume in a lot of ways, but also that I would discourage, because of this networking system that's going on and how vulnerable that can make you, I would discourage putting personal information about where you went on vacation, or a community event that you're going to be attending. I would just not put that information on that platform. I would make it exclusively professional if you can.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. Good advice. Next question. Actually, a suggestion here too. Question is, do you think journalists in general should do quarterly cyber checks, especially when you have software similar to Pegasus?
So I think quarterly checks are a great idea. Knowing whether or not you're at risk of Pegasus, which is a spyware program that can be installed on your phone with spear phishing attacks or otherwise, knowing whether you're at risk for that really determines what level of security checks you should be doing. Because there's so many additional levels that you can get to. You can get Faraday cages, you can have dedicated devices, burner phones, etc. It all depends on what your level of risk is and who you think your adversary is. But I think generally speaking, regardless of what sort of tier of risk you feel you are in, given your current reporting or your current newsroom, quarterly is great. And it just is a question of how extensive is that search. So if you do use Yael's big ass data broker opt-out list, doing that quarterly is a great idea. But also having quarterly malware screenings if you are engaging with a lot of material from sources online that could have tracking spyware involved is also a good idea. So yes, quarterly, great choice. And then what exactly is in that checklist will depend on your threat level.
Got it. A couple more here before we wrap up. In the very beginning of your presentation, you mentioned perhaps using a password manager. But I've always wondered about the security of the password manager. Is there much concern there? Are they very secure? Any
Yeah.
red flags we should be aware of if we do use a password manager?
Yes, there are definitely red flags, and not all password managers are made equal. Google, for example, can act as your password manager. I would discourage this because of the aforementioned possible issues with Google being subpoenaed. But LastPass, which is very popular, the first password manager I used, and unfortunately, ashamed to say, I haven't made the transfer over yet because it can be really laborious. So a little word of warning there, but LastPass had a major data breach where people's passwords for their password managers were exposed. And that is a worst case scenario. I will say 1Password has much higher levels of security for entering into the password manager. It basically has like a long pass key that you have to enter additionally to the password that is harder to expose. So it is largely considered the most secure password manager. So if you don't have any set up yet, I would recommend starting with that.
Got it. One last question, and actually, I'm going to go off a comment here in the chat. The comment is that a new tactic on the rise is scammers texting people who either write in that person's style or use their voice. It's a very convincing tactic. So, curious not only if you have any thoughts about that, but more generally, what are some threats that you see on the horizon that we might want to be aware of that will really come to the fore within the next year or two?
I hate to be almost like a broken record with the rest of the media industry right now, but honestly, I'm terrified about the possibilities that AI may have for this. These sort of targeted spear phishing attacks are becoming more common. It used to be really laborious to gather all of that information and make these really hyper personalized attacks. But as you mentioned, recordings of people's voices that then are remixed and used to make convincing messages is deeply alarming. And being able to tell that that is not your loved one is very, very challenging. Also, it opens a whole new realm of dangers in terms of fake, uh, God, like fake porn, basically. I don't know how to say this more eloquently, of taking your image, your likeness, and putting your face in photos, but now also video that is convincingly real, and the jeopardizing effect that can have for you both personally and professionally. So yeah, I am deeply alarmed about these possible things, and thus all of the alarms about if you don't have to, maybe don't put your face on the internet as much as you can.
Or maybe we'll add that to the short list of
Yeah, short list.
immediate
Avoid your
takeaways
face.
from today's
Yeah.
lesson. Stephanie, thank you so much for all of this information, all of this great advice, and many thanks to everyone else who joined us today. We provide these lessons as a public service to you, so please return the favor. Encourage your colleagues and friends to join us each month. We have a lot to learn from each other, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon. On behalf of NEFAC, thank you for all you do, and we'll see you next month for our next 30-minute skills. Take care, everybody.